final attack on opposition and execution of thousands. Basically, the 2 years after revolution and after Islamic regime reestablished the secret police and army forces, the final attack started against the opposition and people's movement. Following Khomeinie's order in 20 June 1981, thousands of people were arrested and executed at a rate of 100 people per day in Islamic courts, which lasted a few minutes. And they also announced it in the newspaper every day in order to scare the society. From 1981 to 1983, which the massacre started, more than 11,000 people were killed. Many of them included the political prisoners during the Shah regime who were released during the revolution and then arrested and executed by Islamic regime. And that has an irony, which means whatever Shah wasn't able to finish, Islamic regime finished it. That means all those political prisoners that Shah forced to release, Islamic regime arrested them and execute them. On the right hand side, what you see is on the big demonstration of the mothers of the Mujahideen, which was organized, and the bottom you see the big Sir Khordad, which was 1981, which after that the massacre started. Basically, it's about 500,000 people came in the street of Tehran and demonstrate while the government shooting at them and dispersed them. And that was the big force of people appears on the street, and after that the massacre started and the revolution completely defeated. After the massacre of June 1981, Kurdistan was the last point of resistance. Following the start of massacre, many activists who survived either fled Iran or went to free areas of Kurdistan. Khomeinie led the struggle of poor people in Kurdistan. It was a big leftist organization who started fighting against regime just from the February 1979. Although the Kurdish resistance Peshmerga forces were out of the cities, they had free area under their control for a few years. Creation of the Communist Party of Iran united Khomeinie with a few other leftist organizations, which led to continuation of resistance for a few more years. The picture that you see on the right hand side, on the left, is the first women graduated from the training in Khomeinie. On the right side is also Peshmergas from the Khomeinie. The picture below, you see the meetings and demonstration of the Khomeinie as they are going through different villages, and the slogan at the bottom left, it says Beji Socialism, which means Viva Socialism. So it was a very influential organization, and they carry out the resistance in Kurdistan for a few years before they push back to Iraq. Islamic regime silenced the resistance not overcome by the Shah regime. The demand of people for freedom, equality, and humane government, which caused the uprising against Shah, finally was defeated with the rise of Islamic regime. Many political prisoners during the Shah, which were released during the uprising, were arrested and executed. Workers' leaders arrested and many of them executed. Many activists fled from Iran or were killed or jailed. Islamic regime and Islamic movement were built over the bodies of many people who resisted and were massacred. The right hand side is the picture of Khavaran, is the big graveyard who basically which destroyed by the Islamic regime weekly and sometimes daily. They attack the family of the political prisoners, and they don't even allow any gravestone to be installed there. This is a picture from that graveyard, which still exists, and people going there and try to keep it as a historical place to show the criminal nature of this regime. After the Cultural Revolution and purged the universities from the activists, and also the massacre of 1981, and basically pushing back the movement to outside of the country, the demand of people which causes the revolution did not die with the massacre of the first generation of the activists. 20 years after the massacre of 1981, the new generation of activists start their demand for freedom and equality. 2001 and thereafter, new generations of the students, workers, and women came to street and loudly demand freedom, equality, and dignity. Regime responded with arresting workers' leadership, student and women rights activists. The potential crisis gives rise to a reformist movement within the regime in order to prevent the explosion and fall of the system. As I mentioned, the student movement started after 20 years, which was completely organized by pro-government organizations such as Tahkim Wahdat, which was one of the forces involved in the cultural revolution, and leftist student has to work under their banner. For the first time, after 20 years, they were able to come to the university with the slogan of freedom and equality, and you can see their pictures and with the red banner and their demand for their basically freedom and equality in Iran. And the bottom picture is another socialist student when Ahmadinejad went to Polytechnic, and he says, the fascist president, you cannot come to Polytechnic. He is arrested. He's actually in a jail right now, and he might be executed. As I mentioned, after basically 20 years, some of the part of the regime sensing that there is a revolutionary movement cooking up to continue the defeated revolution in 1979, they start a reformist movement, which was led to the election of Khomeinie, and they try to basically divert the anger of people towards some reformist demands which never even materialized. And at the same time, the revolutionary movement start organizing. For the first time, the student protest on July 9, 1999 came basically to street, and it was started from the dormitory, and after attack by the regime at night, for a week the street around the university in Tehran were the battlefield between student, youth, and Islamic regime paramilitary besiegers. 17 people were killed and 70 people disappeared and thousands were arrested. The protest spread to Tabriz, Mashhad, Isfahan, and Shiraz University. At the beginning, the students used the fight between President Khomeinie, the reformist section of the regime, and his rival faction as a cover to protest. The protest went beyond the boundary of the regime, and with Khomeinie's support, the protest was brutally smashed. As I mentioned, for the first time, 2006 and 2007 was after the massacre of leftist students in 1980s. The leftist students declared their presence in universities and were able to demonstrate in different cities inside the university under the red banner of freedom and equality. More than 70 student activists from left were arrested and tortured for a few months. Later, with very high bails, they were released, and many of them ran away to outside of the country and sought refugee status. And the interesting part is some of the leadership of the Tahkim Wahdat, which is now the pro-Khomeinie and Mousavi organization, like Quchani, they were asking regime, why you are letting these people to demonstrate in university? You should arrest them. So they were, while they were staying opposition to the regime, but they never forget how they are anti-communist and anti-left, and they always create that boundary that they are working within the regime, and they try to basically create an environment so they can diffuse the anger of people and lead them towards very reformist platform, so doesn't allow for the revolution that was defeated in 1979 to continue, which will not be successful, as you can see in the last 7 months.